Sometimes,
Mommy, look!
childhood wounds are not caused by what happened, but by what never happened. A child doesn't need perfection, only to feel seen. We seek unavailable partners because emotional distance feels like normal. Healthy love can feel uncomfortable, even unsafe.
You seem distracted. Is everything okay?
Yeah, fine.
You can talk to me.
And sometimes, silence becomes louder than words.
Emotions are ignored. Children learn to ignore themselves.
But healing begins the moment we finally choose to listen.
Today, we're talking about something that so many people carry around with them, often without even having a name for it. It's called childhood emotional neglect. And it's a really strange kind of wound because it doesn't come from what happened to you, it comes from what didn't. And this quote, it just perfectly captures what we're getting into. We're not talking about big, obvious, dramatic moments. We're talking about a quiet, steady, persistent absence that can actually shape the entire course of a person's life. So let's explore what that really means.
So first up, let's just get really clear on what this invisible wound actually is. Because unlike other kinds of harm, emotional neglect is all about what was missing. And that right there is what makes it so incredibly confusing and so hard to put your finger on.
Okay, so here's the key difference you've got to grasp. Abuse is pretty clear-cut, right? It's something that happened to you. But neglect, that's about omission. It's about all those thousands of little moments, the moment a child reaches out for comfort and just gets nothing, or when they're bursting with excitement and no one shares their joy. It's the silence. The silence is what does the damage.
So what happens when this becomes a pattern day in and day out? Well, the brain, being the amazing survival machine it is, adapts. And there's a term for this, an internalized neglect schema. It's basically a survival program where a child learns, okay, don't ask, make yourself small, wanting connection is a burden. And that program? That becomes the blueprint for how they see the world and their relationships as an adult.
So that childhood blueprint, it doesn't just vanish when you turn 18. Not at all. It leaves these distinct echoes in our adult lives. And a lot of the time, we don't even recognize where they're coming from. So let's look at some of the most common signs.
The first one, and honestly, the one that's kind of the foundation for all the others, is this deep, deep disconnection from your own feelings. Think about it. If every time you had an emotion as a kid, it was ignored, what do you learn? You learn to stuff it down. You never build what you could call emotional literacy.
And this right here is what that looks like in real life. Your own emotions start to feel like a foreign language. You might know you feel bad or off, but you literally can't name it as sadness or fear or disappointment because you were never given the words or the space for it.
All right, the next sign is a really tough one. It's this absolutely crushing sense of shame over the smallest little mistake. When you don't grow up with that emotional safety net, you start to believe, deep down, that you have to be perfect to be loved. There's just no room for error.
Wow, this quote is just so powerful because it shows you it's not really about the mistake itself, is it? It's about this deep-seated childhood fear that if someone is disappointed in you, love and connection will just be gone, completely withdrawn. Okay, here's another one you might recognize, being super defensive. If your childhood was full of stop crying or being ignored until you got over it, then any question about what you're doing or feeling can feel like an accusation, like an attack is coming. Your whole nervous system is just wired for trouble. How specific is that? And yet, so many people hear that and think, oh my gosh, that's me. A totally neutral, simple question gets filtered through this lens of past neglect, and suddenly it feels like you're on trial. It's a perfect example of the past just living right there in the present moment.
And finally, we come to one of the most painful patterns of all, unconsciously seeking out partners who are emotionally distant. You might wonder, why on earth would anyone do that? Well, because it feels normal. It feels familiar. A healthy, present, available partner can actually feel weird, smothering, because that level of connection is so foreign. That silence from childhood becomes a strange kind of comfort zone.
Now look, all these feelings, all these behaviors, they aren't just in your head. This isn't just a psychological quirk.
There's hard science that shows us why being ignored has such a massive impact. It literally changes the architecture of a child's developing brain.
So in developmental psychology, there's this really beautiful concept called serve and return. It's kind of like a game of tennis. The child serves by babbling or pointing or crying, and the parent returns the serve with eye contact, a word, or a hug. And that simple back and forth, that's what literally builds the neural connections for trust, security, and a sense of self-worth. It's absolutely fundamental.
But what happens when the serve just hangs in the air? When the return never comes, over and over again? The child's brain gets flooded with the stress hormone cortisol. It goes into this state of high alert, and when that becomes chronic, researchers call it toxic stress. And we know it can physically damage the parts of the brain responsible for things like memory and emotional control.
And if you need one fact to really drive this home, this is it. The science is crystal clear. Emotional neglect isn't less bad than physical abuse. A major Harvard study found that the brain scans of kids who are chronically ignored can look almost identical to the scans of kids who've been through severe physical trauma. Let that sink in. The absence of connection can be just as damaging as the presence of harm.
Okay, I know that was a lot, and hearing all that can feel really, really heavy. But please, hang with me, because the story absolutely does not end there. Understanding the wound is step one. But the next step, the most important one, is knowing that healing is 100% possible. You can rewrite the story.
This right here, this might be the single most powerful shift in the entire healing process. It's moving away from that constant, shameful question, what's wrong with me, which is just the child inside you blaming itself, and instead learning to ask with genuine, gentle curiosity, what happened to me? That one little change in question, it changes everything.
And all of this hope is grounded in science. There's this incredible concept called neuroplasticity. All it means is that your brain is not fixed. It's not set in stone. The very same adaptability that wired your brain for neglect when you were little can be used to rewire it for connection, safety, and self-worth as an adult. Your past does not have to be your future.
So how do we actually do this? A really helpful way to think about it is reparenting yourself. It means you start consciously giving yourself the things you never got. You start by just acknowledging the pain, validating it for yourself. Then you learn to listen to your feelings like they're important messages, not annoyances. You practice responding to your own mistakes with kindness, not criticism. And crucially, you start seeking out people, friendships, relationships that feel safe and that help you rewire your brain for trust.
You know, if you take one thing away from all of this, please let it be this. That deep, aching loneliness that so often comes with emotional neglect. It is not proof that you are broken or unlovable. It is proof that you are a human being who was born wired for connection, a connection you always, always deserved. And this leads us to a really beautiful and profound paradox. The very people who know the sting of being invisible, they often develop this extraordinary superpower to truly see other people. So as you go on this healing journey, I want to leave you with a final thought. What if healing your own wound isn't just about saving yourself? What if it's about breaking a generational cycle and bringing a rare and powerful kind of empathy into the world?